My designation is Karn Voxel, and until 4 rotational cycles ago, my name carried weight across 3 combat sectors. When commanders spoke of discipline, efficiency, and flawless instruction, they spoke of me. Or rather, they used to. You see, reputations in the Galactic Defense Corps are built slowly and destroyed in seconds, and mine ended with a human, a reflex, and an elbow moving faster than my pride could retreat. I am not telling this story to defend myself. That luxury was stripped away along with my dignity. I tell it because too many beings across the galaxy still believe strength is measured in mass, claws, or bone density. I believed that too, right up until the moment my face collided with a training floor designed to survive orbital bombardment. But before we reach that moment, you need to understand the setting. The scale. The arrogance. The Axiom Combat Pavilion aboard Station Rylox is one of the largest military training facilities ever constructed. Its floor alone spans nearly a kilometer, reinforced with layered alloys meant to absorb shock from heavy species sparring at full force. The walls shimmer with holographic terrain generators, weapon racks, and elevated observation tiers where officers, analysts, and board veterans gather to watch recruits fail. For 16 cycles, I commanded that floor. I trained species with natural armor thicker than starship hull plating. I corrected warriors whose limbs could shatter steel with a careless swing. None of them ever landed a clean strike on me. Not once. So when High Command informed me that humans, soft, oxygen-dependent mammals from a mid-tier gravity world, were being added to my program, I laughed. Out loud. In the briefing chamber. I called it a political gesture. A morale experiment. A mistake. Then Lieutenant Elena Ward walked onto my training floor. And I smiled, because I thought I was about to teach the galaxy a lesson. The Axiom Pavilion was alive that cycle. Word had spread quickly. Humans were finally entering advanced multi-species combat training. Curiosity alone filled every observation tier. Analysts leaned forward. Veterans whispered bets. Some came expecting comedy. Others came expecting carnage. I stood at the center of it all, arms folded behind my back, my armored boots planted firmly on the alloy floor. I was a Varkesh, nearly 300 kilograms of muscle, reinforced bone ridges, and natural talons. My species evolved on a high-gravity world where hesitation meant extinction. Combat was not something we learned. It was something we refined. My record reflected that. 0 training fatalities. Near-perfect graduation rates. Commendations stacked higher than most instructors' careers. I had broken recruits down and rebuilt them stronger. Smarter. Deadlier. Humans, I was told, survived through cooperation and tools. Fragile bones. No claws. No armor. No natural weapons. Frankly, I was insulted that they were placed under my authority without warning. The recruits lined up across the floor, Krellians, Zoloti, Tethrin, and 3 humans. My gaze passed over them until it stopped on her. Lieutenant Ward was small by galactic standards. Barely over 5.5 feet. Compact build. No visible enhancements. Her dark hair was tied back neatly, her posture straight but relaxed. She stood still, eyes forward, breathing slow. I mistook composure for fear. I began my introduction, pacing slowly in front of the line, my voice echoing through the chamber. For the next 6 cycles, I announced, you will forget who you were before this moment. I will teach you how to survive combat against superior enemies. My steps stopped in front of Ward. She didn't flinch. That should have warned me. Instead, I felt irritation. Disrespect, even. Most recruits showed instinctive submission when confronted by a Varkesh instructor at close range. She simply waited. Human, I said, lowering my head slightly so my shadow fell over her. Explain why your species believes it belongs in advanced combat training. She met my gaze calmly. Sir, she replied evenly, I was selected by command. I intend to complete the program. No hesitation. No tremor. No excuses. I nearly admired it, nearly. Instead, I turned back to the formation and launched into a lecture I had delivered countless times before. Combat, I explained, was about reaction speed, damage tolerance, and raw capability. Heart and determination meant nothing if your body failed you. To demonstrate, I activated a combat drone calibrated for heavy species engagement. The machine attacked immediately. For 5 minutes, I dismantled it piece by piece. Precision strikes. Joint locks. Momentum control. When it finally collapsed into scrap, I wasn't even breathing hard. The observers applauded. I turned back toward the recruits, letting my gaze settle once more on Ward. Humans, I said, possess limited endurance, fragile skeletal structures, and no natural weapons. You survive through technology and tactics, not physical confrontation. A few recruits laughed. Ward didn't react. That silence should have terrified me. I decided then to use her as an example. "Lieutenant Ward," I commanded. "Step forward." She did so immediately, positioning herself 6 feet away. Balanced. Alert. I explained that I would demonstrate defensive posture against an incoming strike. I exaggerated my movements, making them slow and obvious. The lesson was meant to show how even inferior species could learn basic survival techniques. I moved closer to adjust her stance. Too close. I reached out, intending to reposition her elbow. That was when her head moved. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't violent. It was reflex. Her forehead struck my facial ridge with a sharp, wet impact that sent fire through my skull. Pain exploded across my senses. I stumbled back, my blood, spilling onto the floor. The entire pavilion fell silent. Ward immediately apologized, hands raised, concern on her face. I should have stopped. I didn't. Humiliation does strange, dangerous things to the mind, especially to one that has never been forced to confront it before. For 16 cycles, I had stood on that floor as an authority figure, unquestioned and unchallenged. In a single heartbeat, that illusion cracked. 50 witnesses had just watched a human, one I had publicly dismissed, slam her forehead into my face hard enough to draw blood. Even as the pain flared through my skull, something worse burned beneath it. Pride. The rational response would have been to step back, to acknowledge the accident, to reset the exercise and move on. Any competent instructor would have done exactly that. But competence deserted me the moment I felt warm blood sliding down my snout and onto the training floor. Laughter hadn't broken out yet. That silence, thick, stunned, waiting, felt heavier than mockery. I could feel every eye in the pavilion locked onto me, watching to see what I would do next. In that moment, I was no longer thinking like an instructor. I was thinking like a wounded animal trying to reassert dominance. "You just assaulted a superior officer," I snapped, my voice distorted by pain and swelling. Even as the words left my mouth, part of me knew they were wrong. But I was already committed. Backing down felt impossible. Lieutenant Ward's expression shifted instantly. The concern vanished. In its place appeared something cold and alert, like a switch had been flipped behind her eyes. She started to speak, calmly, professionally, but I cut her off and stepped toward her. That was the true mistake. I reached out to seize her shoulder, intending to escort her off the floor and salvage what remained of my authority. I never touched her. I didn't even come close. Her body reacted before conscious thought could intervene. Her stance lowered, weight dropping smoothly as she pivoted on her rear foot. I remember thinking, absurdly, that her movement looked efficient. Then her elbow was suddenly there, arcing upward with terrifying precision. The impact was catastrophic. Her elbow struck my jaw at exactly the wrong angle, transferring force directly into the joint. I felt something shift that should never have moved. The sound it made was wet and final, like meat slapped against alloy. My vision fractured into sparks and shadow as pain overwhelmed every other sensation. My legs failed me. Gravity took over. I remember falling. I remember realizing, too late, that I was no longer in control of anything. Then the training floor surged up to meet my face, and the world went dark. For several seconds after I hit the floor, the entire Axiom Pavilion froze. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the ambient hum of the station seemed to recede, as if reality itself was pausing to process what had just occurred. Then chaos erupted. Voices shouted from the observation tiers. Boots thundered across the training floor as security personnel and medics rushed in from multiple access points. Somewhere above me, someone was calling for emergency response clearance. I tried to speak, to protest, to explain, but all that came out was a wet, garbled sound accompanied by fresh waves of agony. My jaw was no longer where it belonged. Through blurred vision, I saw Lieutenant Ward step backward, her hands raised immediately in a non-threatening posture. She didn't try to flee. She didn't look triumphant. Her face showed shock, concern, and something else I couldn't quite place, resignation perhaps. As if she had known this moment was inevitable the instant I reached for her. Security restrained her quickly, though not roughly. Protocol demanded containment, even when guilt was unclear. She didn't resist in the slightest. I tasted blood, coppery and thick, and felt a high-pitched ringing drown out most other sounds. My face felt wrong. Heavy. Loose. I realized dimly that I could no longer feel part of it at all. One of my fellow instructors knelt beside me, muttering something that sounded suspiciously like an insult mixed with concern. Med scanners passed over my head, projecting data streams I couldn't read. The verdict was obvious anyway. This was not a minor injury. From the observation tiers, the murmuring began to rise. Did you see that strike? That wasn't panic. That was trained response. Each fragment cut deeper than the pain. I was loaded onto a hover stretcher, immobilized and half-conscious, as the reality of what had happened began to sink in. This wasn't just an injury. It wasn't just embarrassment. This was a public collapse, witnessed by dozens of officers, instructors, and analysts. And worse than all of it, somewhere deep inside, beneath the shock and pain, I knew the truth. I had escalated. Whatever consequences came next, I had earned them. The medical bay aboard Station Rylox was designed to inspire calm. Soft lighting, neutral colors, quiet efficiency. On most days, it succeeded. On that day, it felt more like a stage, and I was the unwilling centerpiece. The medical officer worked methodically, scanning my injuries with an air of professional detachment that barely concealed her amusement. Dislocated mandible, fractured facial ridge, minor concussion, extensive soft tissue damage. Each diagnosis felt like another entry in a ledger cataloging my downfall. Speaking was agony. Breathing hurt. Pride was non-existent. While they worked, my data pad began vibrating nonstop. Message alerts stacked faster than I could read them. Station notifications. Instructor channels. Private messages. Even civilian feeds. Someone had already uploaded the security footage. High definition. Multiple angles. Slow motion. By the time my jaw was partially stabilized, the clip had spread beyond the training complex. Someone had isolated the moment of impact and looped it. Someone else added dramatic music. Captions followed. Titles followed those. Instructor learns about human reflexes. Sizes and everything. Advanced combat theory, practical demonstration. I didn't need to see it to know exactly how it looked. Colleagues drifted in under the pretense of concern, staying just long enough to watch another replay or ask a question that sounded innocent but wasn't. Laughter echoed more freely now, mixed with disbelief and grudging admiration. The worst part wasn't the ridicule. It was the analysis. They replayed her movement frame by frame, pointing out the pivot, the balance, the angle of the strike. They discussed human close quarters doctrines I had dismissed without reading. They spoke of training philosophies designed specifically for fighting larger opponents. Each word reinforced the same conclusion. This hadn't been luck. This hadn't been instinct. It had been preparation. And I, in my arrogance, had walked directly into it. The formal inquiry took 2 days. 2 very long, very thorough days. Every second of footage was reviewed from every angle. Audio transcripts were cross-referenced. My statements were compared against security logs and eyewitness accounts. The conclusion was unavoidable. Lieutenant Ward's initial head contact was deemed accidental. My subsequent attempt to physically restrain her was classified as escalation. Her response, fast, controlled, and proportional, fell squarely under justified self-defense. Case closed. No charges filed. I received a formal reprimand, mandatory retraining, and a permanent note in my service record that would follow me for the remainder of my career. My authority remained intact on paper, but something essential had been stripped away. 3 days later, command ordered us into the same room. I sat stiffly, jaw still braced, facing Lieutenant Ward across the table. She looked exactly as she had on the training floor, calm, attentive, unafraid. I apologized first. Not because I was ordered to, because I finally understood. She apologized too. Not for defending herself, but for the outcome, for the injury, for the spectacle. When asked about her background, she listed years of human combat training without pride or defensiveness. Systems designed for survival, for efficiency, for defeating larger enemies. I had dismissed all of it. She graduated top of her class. I returned to teaching with a lesson etched into bone and memory. Humans are not the strongest species in the galaxy. They are not the fastest. They are not the most durable. They lack claws, armor, and natural weapons. What they possess is awareness. They know they are outmatched. They have always known. So instead of relying on biology, they rely on preparation. They analyze. They adapt. They train relentlessly, building systems that turn weakness into leverage. That is what makes them dangerous. I still teach at Station Rylox. I still run combat drills. But when a human recruit steps onto my floor now, I do not smile. I do not assume. I do not underestimate. Because somewhere in the galaxy, there is another instructor like I once was confident, experienced wrong. And somewhere nearby, there is a human with perfect timing and one well-trained elbow. Trust me, you only need to learn this lesson once.